Just looking at the comment by the president of the Female Artists Association of Nigeria, and she was pretty much lamenting the low appreciation of art locally. Would you agree that that is a big challenge in Nigeria as an artist? What's been your experience?
Well, there's a general low appreciation for art really in Nigeria, but that's not to say that there's not an upward trajectory. The statement is not completely right, because if you consider artists like Peju Alatishe, Njideka Crosby, who are doing well at auctions both in Nigeria and in New York and London, you realize that there's some movement upwards. So it might not be, it's not all gloomy.
All right, so you did mention about displays abroad, and so let's talk about that, the potential to export Nigerian art. What has been the reception of art from this country, and potentially where do you see that going forward? I
mean, of recent, it's been tremendous, and I'd like to acknowledge people like Professor Bening, the late Professor Bening, who did very great pieces and are being appreciated right now. A couple of recent works were just found, and they were sold at Sotheby's, and they auctioned really well. For example, recently, for about 7 years now, Auction House Lagos or Terra Culture and My Dream Gallery have been auctioning pieces in Nigeria, and you realize that annually it comes about a little over $2 million US. So really, there have been efforts, and it is getting better.
Right. At the end of the day, I guess art is very much like entrepreneurship generally in Nigeria. To a large extent, it is the individual, and to some extent as well, the trade groups that are really pushing their product out there. What would you say in terms of, should I say, government support for arts, even though we know that there is that conversation about diversifying Nigeria away from oil, trying to create jobs in other sectors as well?
I mean, what we've had so far, it's just the impetus of individuals. You see people like Prince Yemisi Shilon, who's like the largest collector in Nigeria, and you see people like Newton Jibuno, who owns Didi Museum. It's been individuals, but institutions have come to assist as well. PAU, Pandalaki University, is also collects and exhibits. They just got, I think, a grant from Yemisi Shilon to build a museum and gallery within the premises. Also, banks like GT Bank have been trying, but the government can do a bit more. And I'll explain. While I was doing my MBA, I had a residency in Japan, and I met an individual called Taku Mizawa, who was saddled with the concept they call Cool Japan. It was an initiative he designed and was sponsored by the government to ensure that things like kawaii, things like Japanese animation, manga art became viable exports, which was like an exhibition of soft power per se. So they would sponsor it, and then they'll wait for a few years to see the growth in that sector. I think the government can do a bit more in Nigeria.
But for individuals and potentially corporations that would like to back art in Nigeria, what would you say to them in terms of the, if you like, return on investment here?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you see, Terra Culture is making a killing. My Dream Gallery has been there for years. Didi Museum and the rest of them. You see new entrants like Relay Gallery, Red Dog Gallery. If there wasn't any market, these guys would not be opening shop. It's really thriving. And individuals, I mean, I have a couple of young artist friends who are doing residencies in Senegal right now, one in South Korea, Karu Apokire, Uthman Wahab. These are young men who just graduated maybe art school, but they are already, making giant strides.
What part of the country would you say is like the art hub of Nigeria? Would that be Lagos?
It's definitely Lagos.
Okay, because I think
but Abuja
there's a rich culture in places like Benin, for instance.
Definitely, yeah, but of course it all comes to Lagos at the end of the day, because the main exhibitions, the one by Art House Contemporary and Terra Culture and My Dream, holds annually in Lagos.
All right. Okay, and in terms of trying to increase those exhibitions, because in my mind, that is really what gets the artists out there and makes it commercially viable for them. Is that one area that you think that the governments could, if they're not getting into the type of projects that you mentioned that your friend in Japan is seeing support from the government from, at least they should be able to support that.
They do try. I mean, there are spaces provided by at the National Theatre. There's also National Commission for Museum and Monuments. They help, they assist the artists with spaces. But really, I think the government could do a little more in terms of grants, scholarships, sponsorships, at least for the if not for the established artists, for the budding artists to encourage, growth in that sector. I'll give you an example. This last Saturday, the 7th edition of the Lagos Comic Con held. This is an initiative that is driven by just individuals who love animation and comic books, and held at the Landmark Center in Lagos. And it was just their drive, really no support from the government. This is the 7th edition. Now, those guys will go on to become animators, cinematographers, illustrators for the industry, based on just, the fact that they were just passionate about, things like Marvel and DC comics.
I was just going to get to that. Taking art digital, I was just looking at that old comic character, Voltron, and it is an American character, but it has very strong links to Japan. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, in this digital era, there is an opportunity to really export Nigeria's culture by looking at areas like that. Do you think that we're moving closer to that?
The funny thing is that what you just stated is a misconception, because Voltron is Japanese.
Right.
And it became American after, because they exported their own manga animation.
Right.
And of course did the dubs over it in English, so we assume that it's American, but it really is Japanese. So that's, imagine if we were already exporting our own animation, people all over the world would just assume it's some African concept. They wouldn't know that it was Nigerian.
So I even
that's
missed
how
it's actually a Japanese
character.